On April 18, 1943, a squadron of P-38 Lightnings streaked just above the waves of the vast Pacific. Within one of those cockpits, First Lieutenant Rex Barber endured the intense, oppressive heat. Yet, he pushed forward, acutely aware that this mission represented the highest-stakes objective of his military career, the elimination of Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the architect of the Pearl Harbor assault, the very man who once boasted of negotiating a peace treaty within the White House itself. The American pilots pressed on relentlessly, the coastline of Bougainville soon emerging into sight. Rex Barber meticulously scanned the skies. The intelligence report had been strikingly precise. A single Betty bomber escorted by two formations of 3 Zeros. They were expected to be right here, right now. The plan for Operation Vengeance was simple and tightly calculated. 12 of the Lightnings would ascend to a high altitude, forming a critical overhead cover. The remaining P-38s, a 4-man killer group, would concentrate their entire focus on destroying the bomber carrying the target. They were moments from reaching Bougainville when the radio crackled, "Bogies, 11 o'clock high!" As if on cue, an enemy formation pierced through the clouds. However, the American pilots were immediately taken aback. It wasn't one Betty bomber, but 2. And instead of 6 Zeros, there were more. Their carefully laid plan was unraveling before their eyes. "Which aircraft holds Yamamoto?" The consensus was immediate. "We'll have to take them both." The formations slammed their throttles forward, plummeting toward the brewing conflict. All around Barber, 12 of his squadron mates rapidly ascended, securing their position as top cover and leaving the 4 designated killers to execute the daring charge. But another problem materialized. First Lieutenant Besby Holmes's external drop tanks refused to detach. "Give me a second. I'll tear my tanks off." A nervous Barber watched Holmes dive away from the group, picking up sheer speed to try and shake the tanks loose. "Ray, go with him." Holmes's wingman, Raymond Hine, peeled off quickly to provide protection, instantly cutting the killer group's combat strength in half. Their odds had worsened dramatically. They now faced double the targets with only half the fighters intended for the assault. Yamamoto was directly within their sights. These American pilots would let the world freeze over before allowing him to escape. The Admiral was en route to inspect one of 4 forward operating airfields near Bougainville, accompanied by 8 officers, including his devoted second-in-command, Chief of Staff Matome Ugaki. Ugaki was momentarily dozing when one of their Zero escorts unexpectedly flashed past his cockpit, momentarily slowing right in front of the Betty's nose and wagging its wings. Confused, Ugaki saw the pilot frantically waving his hand and pointing at something. Then the radio operator screamed for the pilot to dive, and the Betty instantly broke into a violent, abrupt, evasive maneuver. The officers aboard clung desperately to their lives as the Japanese bomber plunged into a desperate high-G dive. Ugaki struggled in vain to locate Yamamoto's aircraft. Outside, 3 Zeros threw themselves at the pair of incoming P-38s, utterly determined to halt the attack. Lampier broke away from the formation, climbing to engage the Japanese fighters head-on, leaving Barber to press the charge alone. Lampier opened fire, and the Zeros returned the favor, tracers crisscrossing the sky. Lampier remained unshaken as low-caliber rounds struck his wings, the sound echoing through the fuselage like rattling hail. He kept his trigger depressed, unleashing his full armament until the Zeros were compelled to pull off from the collision course. Barber, however, carried on, leaving the intense dogfight behind him. Ahead, the 2 Bettys suddenly split, flying in opposite directions. He selected one at random and committed to the chase. Barber wasn't alone. A tracer round suddenly streaked past, inches from his cockpit. A Zero from Lampier's fight had pursued him, firing from above. The projectiles continued to zip right past his windshield. He fought the powerful urge to swerve and instead held his sights squarely on the bomber. Barber pulled the trigger, unleashing a devastating torrent of 50 caliber and 20 millimeter fire. The shells tore through the enemy aircraft, pieces began to peel away from the engine cowling, and a thick plume of black oil poured out. But Barber was absolutely relentless. He held the trigger down, even as he distinctly heard and felt his own P-38 being struck repeatedly from behind. He was committed to destroying this bomber, even if it was the last action he ever performed. Then, the Zero hounding him roared past, granting him a few vital moments of reprieve. Barber took better aim and continued to dismantle the bomber, shredding it as he pursued it all the way down to treetop height. The bomber then suddenly pitched up, completely out of control, and rolled violently in the air. Barber instantly dodged, narrowly missing the aircraft's wing as it tumbled down and slammed into a tree below, detonating into a massive, roiling fireball. Barber glanced back over his shoulder to see a heavy column of black smoke climbing from the jungle canopy. "It's down. What's next?" He immediately veered off toward the second target. 3 more Zeros intercepted him from above. They opened fire, and Barber dodged, diving for speed as he listened to the sickening sound of enemy bullets striking his wings and tail, the crackle of impacts echoing through the fuselage. Barber skimmed the forest treetops, desperately dodging left and right in a fight for survival. The 3 enemies refused to disengage. Just as the situation became dire, he spotted the 2 P-38s of Holmes and Hine up ahead. There was hope. He flew toward them, silently praying for them to see him. To his immense luck, his prayers were answered. The pair of lightnings turned straight towards him, charging to the rescue. But muzzle flashes erupted on their noses. His heart plummeted. Time seemed to slow to a crawl as the friendly tracers barreled straight toward him. He held his aircraft steady as the shells streamed past all around him. He was momentarily enveloped by lead, rounds from both allies and enemies surrounding his machine. The lightnings grew closer, guns blazing, until they roared past overhead. Suddenly, the skies fell to an abrupt calm. Shaken, Barber looked back. All the aircraft were gone. The P-38s were speeding off, and the Zeros had been scattered by the 2 Lightnings' bold, aggressive attack. He drew a deep breath and set off for the final Betty. Holmes and Hine turned back immediately after saving Barber's tail. The shot had been extremely risky, but it had worked, and now they were hunting the last remaining bomber. Holmes tracked it down as it desperately tried to flee, skimming the whitecaps out over the open sea. Holmes opened fire, dumping as much ammunition as he could into the large target. Yet the aircraft stubbornly remained aloft as it consumed more and more of his windshield. "Go down or blow up, damn it!" He maintained the attack for as long as he dared before dodging low, sending his P-38 roaring through the impossibly small gap between the enemy aircraft and the sea. Rex Barber watched his squadmate narrowly avoid a collision with the severely wounded Betty, but he instantly realized the target was still flying. He dove in without hesitation, getting right on the bomber's tail and pulled the trigger. His volley struck the main fuel tank and instantly ignited the fumes. The bomber was immediately engulfed in flames and plunged into the sea. Barber had no time to react and flew straight through the resulting explosion, his aircraft momentarily surrounded by fire. But he emerged on the other side, miraculously unharmed. He couldn't celebrate yet. Directly ahead, he saw Holmes and Hine locked in a vicious tangle with a pair of Zeros. Hine's P-38 was heavily damaged and diving away, while Holmes took out one of the Zeros. Barber crashed into the fight, catching the last Zero completely by surprise and gunning him out of the sky. "How's your subscribe level?" "Very low. Help us out here." "If everyone subscribed, then that would be the mission accomplished." Finally, the squadron leader's voice came through on the radio. "Everyone, get your ass home." But while a jubilant American squadron was returning to base, a lone figure emerged from the sea, surrounded by the flaming wreckage of his aircraft. It was Matome Ugaki, badly injured, but incredibly alive. The pilot had also miraculously survived, and the 2 men swam back to the shore, clinging to a piece of debris. A third survivor would later be recovered by a flying boat, becoming the only 3 crew members from the bombers to make it home. Yamamoto had been in the first bomber. He was killed instantly by Barber's gunfire before his aircraft even finished its descent. His body was recovered, and he was buried. His loss inflicted a severe emotional and strategic wound on the Japanese war effort. The widely respected admiral was officially mourned across the entire nation. He was given a full state funeral with the highest honors, with massive crowds gathering to attend. Few were more profoundly affected than Ugaki, who never forgave himself for surviving the attack. He would later write about the event in his diary, recalling, he continued, "The P-38's nose seemed to burst into twinkling flame, and suddenly the bomber shook from the impact of the enemy's machine gun bullets and cannon shells. Everything turned black. Click the like button, comment below with your thoughts on Operation Vengeance, and most importantly, subscribe."